Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a proud privilege for me to be part of this international conference webinar series organized by the IIU, International Internship. Um, yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is always a proud privilege for me and an honor for me to be part of this particular international webinar series organized by the International Internship University, which is the virtual university started recently, a couple of years ago. And I should thank this university is expanded to almost 195 countries across the globe and almost 6 continents it covers. And I'm the IIU country director of South Africa. And I also thank the organizers, particularly Piyush Pandit, to whom I consider as my younger brother, and also Dr. Inga from Georgia for organizing or hosting me, but today's event on 3rd of December 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a professor of economics. My name is Ravinder Rena. I'm based in South Africa. I work for the Durban University of Technology, Faculty of Management Sciences at the Durban University Business School, DUT Business School. The topic that was chosen for today's discussion is that the higher education, the growth, development, and the future challenges. So before I go to the higher education details, that we have a lot of quotes that are available for education. And father of the nation, Nelson Mandela of South Africa, he mentioned that it is the education is the pillar, it is the key, it is the cornerstone of socio-economic development. It is the education that can transform the farmer child as a president of the nation. A mining worker child can become a mining manager, and a scavenger child can become a medical doctor, and a driver child can become an engineer, and probably a peon child, or probably somebody who's working as a security guard, he can do anything with education. So education is a powerful weapon, and which we need to use in the best interest of ourselves as a human being, and also in the best interest of this world and the society in general. So education is always plays a vital role, whether it is primary education, secondary education, tertiary education, higher education, and so on. So education, if you would like to destroy any country in this world, you don't need to use nuclear weapons, or you don't need to use war tanks. You don't need to use Atni Kalashnikov guns, AK-47, AK-57 guns. What you need to do is that you just need to lower the levels and the standards of education. Automatically, the country will be destroyed, ruined, and distracted. So just to give you some example, that if you lower the standards of engineering education, the engineers that we produce, they are all having low levels of skills, low competencies, low efficiency rates, and eventually whatever the engineering plans that they make, whether they are bridges or houses or apartments, they collapse in no time. And there could be a lot of human disasters will take place with that kind of disasters. So that kind of collapse. And then if an economist or a finance executive is produced without having a deeper understanding of the finance, taxation, auditing, accounting, and all the other management related skills, dexterities, and whatever he plans, whatever he predicts and forecasts, it's not going to work because he doesn't have the proper skills. If a medical doctor that is produced with the low levels of education, where he just copied and passed, where he just didn't acquire the required basic skills, a doctor is expected to save the lives of the people. A doctor is expected to promote the welfare of the individuals when they are sick, when they are not feeling well. But that same doctor is not going to do anything actually. Whatever he does, rather he will try to destroy the health of the human being because he doesn't know what he is doing and what he's supposed to do. And if a priest or a church leader, if he could able to preach the people in the church, in the temples, in the mosques, if he doesn't know the value and the ethics and whatever he preaches in those religious places, spiritual places, will also try to give a wrong directions to the people so that that will also does not create any positive impact on the people in general. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that World War II, where Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed by America. And we have Little Boy and Fat Man that killed probably more than 400,000 people. Even up to 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings in August. Until now, no plant grows in those areas where it is worst hit. So we could able to use those atom bombs in order to kill such a huge number of human beings in probably 1945. That was more than 75 years, 76 years ago. But nowadays, you're not going to use those kind of weapons anymore. What you do is that you rather try to lower the levels of education. There is a distinction here I would like to mention that the world is divided into two parts. One is global South countries, which are predominantly developing world. The South countries are developing nations of this world. They're only 75%, or they are the majority of this world. Whereas the North countries on the other side, we have got 25% countries, or the North countries, which are developed countries. They could be America, they could be Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK, and many European countries, and few countries in Asia like Japan and South Korea, Singapore, and so on. So, but there is a saying that the developed countries, they want to make developing world, including African continent where I'm staying, as the suppliers of the raw materials, or the suppliers of the human beings who can work as laborers, indented laborers, or servant maids, or maybe they look at that we can work as security guards or low-level skill-based positions at the higher level skill-based positions that Africans or the people from developing countries cannot or should not occupy. So this is the kind of strategy that has been developed over a period of time. That is why Africa is the rich continent in the whole world. If you look at the resource and by the definition of the resources, what we have in the African continent, what the rest of the world has got or do not have in this world, just to let me give you some clarity. And Africa is the only continent in the world, which is the second largest continent, which has got about 31 million square kilometers land. And Africa provides or possesses about 75% of the platinum deposits of this world. And Africa is the continent which possesses more than 60% of the diamonds of this world. And Africa is the continent which possesses about 56 to 57% of the gold deposits of this world. So I'm just quoting about diamonds, platinum, and gold. I'm not going further into the petroleum and other natural resource base. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, you can imagine that Africa is the continent where the whole world needs Africa's support. But the world leaders on the other side of the coin, they don't want African countries to become manufacturers. They only want commodity users. They don't want commodity producers. So most part of Africa, we have got about 1.4 billion people living in this African continent today. And the majority, South Africa is the leading country. And let's say Nigeria is also the largest economy in African continent. Egypt is also one of the largest. So Nigeria and Egypt and also South Africa, three of them together, they possess more than 60-65% of the total income of African continent. Now, what does it tell us? And why I'm giving this background information here is that the education is being divided among these developed and developing countries. And even for the past 5 to 7 decades of most of the nations, developing countries that are liberated, that got independence, for the last 50 to 70 years, there is no significant growth or development that has ever occurred in the overall higher educational development of either African continent or Asian continent or world probably in general. So I would like to unpack here that the world has divided into two groups, developed and developing. And developed countries, they should work together hand in hand with the developing countries so that they both can develop and they grow together. But that's not happening because because in order to maintain the global economic order, in order to maintain the global structures, and they want to make African continent as a raw material supplier, a raw material provider, so that the prices of these goods, they can be kept in pace and they can also rule, they can monopolize the production, they can manufacturing sector and the markets in general. And that's what the hegemony is being created. The other point I would like to mention here, ladies and gentlemen, that the leaders in African continent, they are being, some of them are dictatorial leaders. As long as they receive some aid from these developed countries, they keep quiet. They don't do anything, they don't say anything. And eventually that is hurting the people, 1.4 billion people in this African continent. And eventually whatever the aid that is given to these development of higher educational institutions, technological development, innovation development, science technology, whatever development purposes, or the humanitarian aid that was given, that was not being spent properly for those developments at all. So what is normally happening is that the money that is being received, more than 70-75% of the money that is given to African continent, that is every single dollar, 70 cents are being taken back in the form of consultants coming from Europe, consultants coming from North America, consultants coming from Africa, Australia, and other developed worlds. So this is what a kind of, so with 30 cents, what development that you are going to make in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of humanitarian development, in terms of sustainable economic growth and development, particularly to provide the livelihood to the people of this African continent. So that has not been happening. And this, the 70 cents are being taken back. There's a report made by World Bank some time back. From 1970 until 1996, for about 26 years down the line, these developed countries, they have given more than $350 billion to African continent. From the $350 billion, all the money that has been given is been taken back. As I indicated to you, the formula remains 70% was taken back, 30% is being spent, and that 30% is also maybe most portion of that money has been taken by the corrupt leaders in between. So this is what is happening. That is why African continent is remained as undeveloped or underdeveloped continent, both in terms of economy or also in terms of the education sector. So this is the background information I would like to give. Now, the second point I would like to mention here that in terms of higher education, the topic of today is higher education, how the higher education structure looks like, and how many students are there at the higher educational institutions in this world, how many universities are there in this world, how many universities that we have in African continent and other parts of the world. So I just would like to unpack some of the important points here. That point number one, we reached to 8 billion people on 15th of November 2022. So that means in our world today, about plus minus 17 days ago, we became 8 billion people living on this planet, Mother Earth. From this 8 billion people, and how many people are students, we need to understand here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the statistical figures that can be found by World Bank or IMF or UNESCO or OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, and whatever the statistical base that you look at, plus minus about 2.3 to 2.4 billion people are students. That will be surprising for us, actually. So out of 2.4 billion students, that includes all the pre-primary, primary, secondary, higher tertiary, everybody is included there. Now from that, if you look at the higher education side, the higher education plus minus, we got about 235 million students across this. That's what we have in higher education. How many universities are there in this world today? We got 25,000 universities, ladies and gentlemen. Majority of those universities are probably more than 3,000 universities are there in America. And probably India has got the number of universities that includes deemed universities, that includes central universities, state-funded universities, and other colleges together. India also became the largest country in terms of the higher education institutions in the whole world. India has got about 1,040 universities, and it has got about 48,000 colleges. Some of those Indian colleges are much bigger than that of the universities in South Africa, universities in Africa, universities in the rest of the world. If I give you some more ideas, so that a university, IGNO, you must be heard about IGNO, Indira Gandhi National Open University, which provides the largest number of students, which possesses the largest number of students in the whole world. And some of the countries, they do not have the population of that big. Maybe it's more than 8 millions. And some of the countries like Seychelles and some of the European countries, they do not even have 8 million as their country population, whereas IGNO as a university, it has got more than 8 million population. And we have got UNISA, University of South Africa in South Africa, they got probably more than 500,000 students. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that, ladies and gentlemen, we do have higher educational structures. There are 25,000 universities in the world, and we got plus minus about 235 million students studying at different tertiary higher educational institutions across the globe. So let me unpack this. And of course, India has indicated to you that India has got probably the large number of educational institutions. And though the university numbers look smaller, about 1,000, 1,050, 40, 50, somewhere there, but the 48,000 colleges that are been there, they have got all types of faculties, and sometimes some of the colleges, they have more than 100,000 students. In South African standard, in other African country standard, the average size of university students numbers is about 15,000 students. So 15,000 students, one of the faculties in India, they may have that 15,000 students, because India has got a population base of 1.4 billion people, whereas Africa as a continent also got 1.4 billion people. So they are the equal size. But how many students are there in African continent? According to the latest statistics provided by UNESCO in 2021, we got about 15 million students that are studying in higher educational institutions in African continent. And there are about 1,700 universities, higher educational institutions in the whole African continent. For instance, Nigeria has got more than 265 universities, because Nigeria is the largest populated country in the whole African continent, and maybe it's the 6th or 7th largely populated country in the whole world. It is getting close to 220 million people. That is surpassing Brazil. Brazil has got only about 216, 270 million people, whereas Nigeria has got more than that. So for 220 million people in Nigeria, the higher education universities, particularly, they're about 265. And we got Tunisia, which also got large number of institutions, more than 200, 210 universities are there in Tunisia. Morocco is yet another country where they focus more on the higher educational institutions, and they got plus minus about 160 universities in Morocco. Now, South Africa, where I'm currently living and working here, we have got about 25 universities in South Africa, South African soil. And of course, we got only 60 million population in the country, and we got about 25 public universities. There may be about 50 or 60 other colleges at different levels of education. And that's what we have in Africa. Of course, some of our universities in Africa, they not only stand number one in the African continent, but also they stand among the top 100, 150 universities in the whole world. So that is what the credibility and the standard that are maintained in African institutions. It's a very important point that I would like to make it here. UCT, University of Cape Town, and it has got probably over 35,000 students, and that has got highly ranked. It's number one in the whole of African continent, and also maybe among the 135, 150 in between. The ranks always changes. So that is what UCT ranks in the whole world. And some of the Indian universities like IIMs and IITs of India, they do not even sit among the top 150 institutions in the whole world. So this is what I would like to mention here. We have the University of Witwatersrand University, and we also got Stellenbosch, University of Pretoria, University of KwaZulu-Natal, Durban University of Technology, Northwest University, University of the Western Cape. And these are some of the prominent universities. They always remain among the top 500 to 600 universities in the whole world. So ladies and gentlemen, if we look at this dynamics of education system in African continent, that if you look at 1980, we didn't even have 300 universities in the whole of African continent. In 2000, that means after 20 years later, our number became 800 universities. Now we are in 2021-22, we got about 1,700 universities. So that is a phenomenal growth and development within the higher education sector of African continent. But the same token, if you look at the Indian universities also, in 1948 or 47, after India got independence, the number of institutions were very few, less than 20, to more than 50,000 institutions across the country. So everywhere, the higher education institutions in the world, in different countries, they grew rapidly, exponentially, as the population grew also. If you look at the population growth, ladies and gentlemen, that as indicated earlier in my speech, that we got 8 billion people today. The first 2 billion people that we experienced on this planet was 1804. That is more than 218 years ago. And within 280, 220 years, we grew 7 times more. So proportionately, we need to have educational institutions also. Otherwise, we cannot able to provide the skills and the knowledge and the wisdom to these young minds. So therefore, the higher education higher educational institutions, universities and colleges, they also play an important role in the knowledge development, knowledge sharing process. So ladies and gentlemen, if we look at the other countries, as I indicated that out of 25,000 universities that we have in this world, and about 235 million students that we have in this world, China, India, they are the 2 largely populated countries. So therefore, they possess a huge number of students also. The number of students that China, India, that can able to contribute to the world higher education is absolutely phenomenal. And as indicated to you that the number of students the African continent provides is about about 15 million students that are studying in higher education sector. So given these facts and figures, and where this higher education is going towards, and what are the growth, though we grew and we developed, but what we're still sitting with the same problems: poverty, unemployment, destitution, health problems, social problems, cultural problems, political problems, ethnical problems, and all these problems we are sitting with. Now, the education that we learned, whether they could able to solve the problems of this world or not. So we see that Harvard University, MIT, Stanford University, Oxford, and all these universities, they are always among the top 10 universities in this world. If a professor or a vice chancellor who is working in those top universities, if he is not kind in his behavior, in his attitude, in his approach, and the qualification that he has, he may have a PhD degree, he may have a master's degree, we may have different other degrees and qualifications. Qualification become nothing without we practice that qualification that we earn through our hard work, in our behavior, how kind we are to other human beings, how helpful we are, how supportive we are, and how we encourage the other fellow human beings to grow together, to develop together. That's what is important. If we do not do that, whether your qualification, diploma to PhD, it makes no sense at all. So ladies and gentlemen, one has to remember this point, that it is not about the qualification that you acquire in your life, but it is how best you contribute to the other human development, other fellow human beings, and where you can inspire them, where you can try to motivate them and support them instead of destroying them. Always education should teach our people and young minds and the old minds, whoever they are learning, the learning process, that education should encourage the people to give the hand so that you lift the people and you also make them to grow and empower them, educate them. Don't use the legs to crush them into the ground. So education never taught you like that. In case if somebody is practicing the other way around, using their legs to crush, that means they are worse than illiterates, they're worse than barbarians, let's say. So therefore, now in the higher education arena, we have divided, when we look at the historical figures and the background, India at one stage was the largest economy in the whole world. The most part of the educational institutions like Takshashila, Ujjaini, and maybe many other universities, Nalanda, they are the prominent universities even before Christ, probably 7th century BC and so on. There are lots of scholars from other parts of the world. They used to come to India, they used to study astronomy, architecture, science, technology, innovation, whatever that they possessed in those days, they come to India, they used to study there. India has got a large number of scholars in those days historically. But now, India for more than 1800 years, it used to be the largest economy in the whole world. And it lost its charm, being the largest economy, where it was contributing at one stage 40% of the total global income of this world. And it is also contributing more than 40 to 50% of the scholars of this world at one stage. So now it lost, because of the British colonialism, it lost its power as a largest economy. Now it became the 5th largest economy. But still, as part of the higher education institutions, India succeeded. India has successfully launched so many educational programs. And the IITs and the IIMs, that Indian Institute of Management and Indian Institute of Technology, they are considered of the two eyes of India in general. So the people, those who could not secure the seats in these higher educational institutions, they are the ones who go to Harvard University, Stanford University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and other popular top-ranking universities in the world. Yes. So that is the meaning, that the standards that they maintain, even if you secure 100 out of 100, you are not going to get seat at IIMs and IITs. So that is where the people, they migrate, they study. Now, India is the country which spends huge amount of money, more than $5 billion money on the students that are going to study in those America and the few other countries. Now, it has to be changed. The paradigm need to be shifted. How long we're going to continue to send the students from developing countries to developed countries, where they are trying to, their minds are being trained in such a way that either they serve those developed countries, or they settle there and they try to strive, they work hard, they get Nobel Prizes, and they try to improve, they try to get good reputation, and they make some good scholarly contributions. They don't want to come back to those developing countries in the world. So if they don't come back, and then these developing countries in the world, they will remain developing forever. And that is the kind of strategy of some of these Western educational institutions, that they are trying to shape, they are trying to pollute the minds of the people who are going from developing countries like Georgia, like Herzegovina, like, there are so many other Yugoslavia and so many other former USSR republics, and some of the Soviet blocs. Even those countries, when they go to those Western educational institutions, their minds are being polluted. They think like the West, they don't think like the South. So this is what is happening. So this needs to be changed. Otherwise, this will have a detriment for the education sector, for the human development of this world in the near future. Now, the way we are growing, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely not sustainable, not healthy. We are growing in a manner that top heavy and the bottom weak. A top heavy, bottom weak structures, absolutely, they are not going to be sustainable. So education should play an important role in the lives and the livelihoods of every human being that is living in this world. If education does not contribute for the welfare and for the benefit of this common man in this world, education has got no value actually. So education the value of education has been declining. The value of education has been so much changed and so much diluted over a period of time. People of my age group, maybe those who are in the early 50s, and they may have some conservative and traditional ways of thinking, but those values and ethics are remain there. In this current generation, millennials, and some of them, they are probably, they don't look at the values the way we look at it, actually. So without the value in education, the education is not going to play a major role. As I indicated to you earlier in my opening remarks, that education, if you could able to lower the values and the standards, that will destroy the human beings and that destroys the nation and the societies in general. So ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I would like to add some more issues here, that if you look at the population statistics, the way that the education has been distributed among the world, the population that has been distributed in this world, we got a population, 8 billion population, as indicated to you, that about 16% to 17% people coming from African continent. And India also contributes by and large the same amount. And China contributes about plus minus about 18 to 19%. Whereas if you look at the Europe as a continent, we do not even have 1 billion people there. But Europe can possess 22% of the total higher educational institutions base in the whole world. Whereas in terms of the population, they got less than 10%. So imagine the situation that in Asia, we got 37% of the total educational institutions are centered in the Asian continent, because Asia is the largest continent in the world, which encompasses about 46 million square kilometers land. So Asia possesses the largest share in terms of the student numbers, in terms of the higher education institutions base, or the number of institutions that are centered, whether they could be China, India, Japan, Thailand, or maybe Pakistan, and many other countries, in Bangladesh and so on. So this is what we have in Asia. Whereas in African side, as I indicated to you, that out of 35 million people that we have, and how many million people that we could able to probably provide the African continent is providing. Not even 7% people that are been in the global statistics. If you look at Africa contributes about plus minus 7% students for the higher education sector. So that needs to be changed. And the challenges that I would like to emphasize here is that we have the resource problems here. And resources plays a crucial role in higher education development process. And unfortunately, developing countries in African continent and Asian continent, we do not have the sufficient incomes to support our children for the higher studies, higher levels of technical education and scientific education and so on and so forth. The average income of these developing countries in the world is less than $1,500. Whereas in a country like Qatar, it has got more than $100,000 as their per capita income. Country like Switzerland and America, they got more than $65,000 as their per capita income. So we in the developing countries, our per capita income is not even enough, $1,500. That's what we are sitting with. So if we have this limited per capita income, limited whatever the ethnic capacity that we have, it would be very difficult for us to move and encourage our children to study. The other unfortunate thing is that India and a few other countries in the world, they provide a free education to their citizens, unless otherwise the students wanted to have a private education in the private schools and private colleges and private universities. But if you wanted to study in the government universities, most of the portion of the education, 95% is free education. But it's not the same case in African continent. For instance, in South Africa, for every student, whether they come from a poorer background or whichever background they are, they have to pay for it, unless otherwise they get some bursaries, they get some kind of scholarships and other support, NSFAS funding and so on and so forth. So it is payable. Higher education is costly. Every year the fees goes up, and therefore students' capacity, most of the people are unemployed. And for instance, in South Africa, we got about 35% people are unemployed. Now, parents are unemployed. How do they support their children to send them to the universities and colleges? That is the biggest problem. So the challenge remains here is that resources are the crucial, and that is failing the people to send the children to learn. So this has to be changed, and maybe the leaders of this globe need to think, whether they are World Bank leaders or United Nations and maybe other countries, they should think this is an important issue, that if you wanted to have a better future, you need to educate your people. There's a saying that Chinese saying which says that if you want to plan for a year and just plant maybe a kind of seed, if you plant maybe 10 years, you plant a tree. And if you want to plant 100 years, you educate your people. So without education, we cannot go forward. In the coming maybe 100 years or 200 years down the line, education still plays an important role. Although we have artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotic technologies, and big data, and so many things keep coming, and they're changing our lifestyles rapidly, but still education will always play an important role. So the challenges, particularly in African continent and in developing countries, I'd like to highlight that, ladies and gentlemen, that if you look at the teacher or the professor and student ratio in these African countries, they're always higher. Sometimes it could be 60, sometimes it could be 100, it could be more than that. Whereas in higher education scenario, the ideal figure would be 21 professor to 20 or 25 students. So we have the student-teacher ratio is so high, so that learning capabilities and that will also impact the learning process of the students. And the students, they need to pay their fees. That are also going to have some of the students, they work as waiters, some of them work as security guards, and some of them, they absolutely go a long way to study and they make their living. So when the person who doesn't even have a food, there is starvation with a kind of a situation where they do not have a food, a hungry stomach cannot able to learn. And so this is also another important problem. There are students that even while I was working at University of Western Cape, We identified some of the students who are coming from different locations. They couldn't even afford to feed themselves. So we were contributing, some of the interested lecturers, they were contributing every month some money to feed such kind of students. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, this is a crucial issue. And the other point is that education, if somebody is graduated from Harvard, somebody is graduated from University of West Cape Town, it's not that they are the only people in this world. They are more intelligent than other students who are coming from Ghana, Nigeria, or South African institutions, or maybe Liberian institutions. It is only how best an individual can work hard and develop himself or herself. That's what is important. Somebody who got a certificate from those institutions which are having a reputation in the world doesn't mean that they're more intelligent than you and I. They got a degree, you also got a degree. So ladies and gentlemen, you don't ever undermine yourself, your capabilities. Only thing is that you need to keep learning all the time, because remember that life never stop you teaching. From the day you were born, from the day you die, you always keep learning each and every day. So that is why don't stop learning, because life never stop teaching you. So ladies and gentlemen, therefore, we need to always learn throughout our life. And so in the interest of time, I think I would like to mention a few more important points that the issues that we have in African continent particularly, that a honors graduate is teaching another honors graduate, which should not be the case. That means low levels of capacity of the teaching staff. The teachers who are at least having a master's degree or a PhD degree to teach is higher level students, particularly at the honors and the master's level. But it so happened that 50% of the teaching staff, they do not have PhDs in African continent, and even more than that. So that is why the higher education leaders, they are trying to emphasize, they're trying to promote the PhD or the doctoral studies, and so that every institution in African continent or in other countries in general, they should also promote the doctoral studies. But the challenge remains here that, ladies and gentlemen, they always say that we don't have jobs. It's not correct. We have got jobs, surprisingly, but we do not have competent people to take their positions. So when we produce hundreds and thousands of engineers, medical doctors, how competent they are, whether they could able to have the necessary skills, necessary knowledge, necessary dexterity that they can do the job. That's what is important. So therefore, there should be higher education institutions. They should look at the work that the corporate sector needs, and according to the needs, it's needs-based education. It's a skill-based education. That's what we need to produce the children, produce the youth. It's not that anybody can come and can learn and can disappear. They don't remember what it is all about. So, ladies and gentlemen, education is not, it's a lifelong process, as I indicated to you, that if you study a BTech degree in mechanical engineering, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't stop studying whatever you did at your bachelor's level. You can always promote. You can always try to learn other disciplines. It's always multidisciplinary. Education is very important. So therefore, the more you learn, the more you can think, the better you can train your mind. Education is not remembering about the facts, about the figures. It is training your mind and how to apply your mind to solve the problems. So solving the problem, if you don't solve the problems, if you create the problems, that means you are not an educated person. So ladies and gentlemen, with these few remarks, in the interest of time, I would like to conclude by saying thanks to the International Internship University, particularly Pish Pandit, and also Dr. Inga from Georgia, and Ermina from Romania, my colleagues from different parts of the IAU family, and all other listeners and viewers of this particular program today. I thank each one of you, and I wish I could explain some more important points that are close to my heart, that education in African continent and in developing countries particularly is having a difficult time. So that difficult time need to be changed completely. There should be a paradigm shift, and then we need to have that value-based education. We need to have a education that can create some kind of a change, a positive change in the lives of everybody living in this world. Thank you very much. And if you got any, Inga, you would like to have any kind of questions, or what do you like to do, Inga? Can we conclude, or?
Thank you so much for everything. Great job. Thank you.